Have you ever heard the sound of death? Not biological death, but economic death? That's exactly what it sounds like. Silence. Absolute sterile silence in places built for noise, deals, and ambition. Before you is more than just an empty office. Before you is a monument to an era that ended but forgot to warn its architects. These glass and concrete towers, piercing the skies of New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, are no longer symbols of the might of American capitalism. They are now its most treasured tombstones. Most people, passing by these giants, look up and see grandeur. They see corporate headquarters, shining lights. They think of billion-dollar deals. But what the developers and city officials don't tell you is this. If you take the elevator up to these towers, you won't find life. You'll find emptiness. Professionals call these zombie buildings. These are assets that have died but continue to stand, creating the illusion of normalcy. Owners pay for security, electricity, and heating for people who aren't there and who will likely never return. The system's algorithms are set to hide such videos, so subscribe and like now. It's the only way to ensure the next warning reaches you before disaster strikes. Leave a comment if you're ready to learn what others aren't telling you. Let's talk about numbers, because that's where the real horror of this story lies. Official statistics will tell you that the vacancy rate in U.S. office space is around 20%. That's a disaster. 1 in 5 offices is empty. But this figure is a lie. It's a sweet lie designed to reassure investors and prevent stock market panic. The reality is much more frightening. There's a concept called shadow vacancy. These are spaces that are formally leased. The company continues to pay rent because it's bound by a long-term contract signed in 2019. But physically, no one is there. Access cards don't work at the turnstiles. The coffee machines are covered in a layer of dust. If you calculate these areas, the actual emptiness in American megacities approaches 40%. Think about it. Almost half of America's office space is just a set. There are Potemkin villages of glass and steel. Why is this happening? We're told about remote work, hybrid schedules, and new habits, but these are just symptoms. The real cause is a fundamental shift in the very structure of the economy, which has made the skyscraper obsolete. Just as factory chimneys in city centers once gave way to offices, so now offices are giving way to digital networks. But there's one problem. The factory could have been converted into a loft. A modern office skyscraper, with its vast floor area and central ventilation, is practically impossible to convert into housing. It's a concrete box that can only be used as an office, and if offices aren't needed, then that box is worth nothing. $0, 0 cents. Now imagine that trillions of dollars in loans were issued against this zero. We're witnessing a unique phenomenon, the physical extinction of an entire asset class. This isn't a market correction. This isn't a temporary downturn. This is a total devaluation. In San Francisco, buildings that sold for $300 million in 2019 are now selling for $60 million. That's an 80% drop in price. That's not a discount. That's a crash. But the most terrifying thing about this silence is that it's contagious. A building doesn't die alone. When a skyscraper empties, everything around it dies. The coffee shop on the ground floor closes because there's no one to buy lattes. The dry cleaner across the street goes bankrupt because the clerks no longer return suits. Business lunch restaurants board up their windows. The city is an ecosystem. The office center was its heart, pumping blood, people and money through the street's arteries. Now the heart has stopped, and gangrene is beginning to spread from the center to the outskirts. Do you see this in the headlines about rising crime in business districts? It's no coincidence. Emptiness attracts chaos. When white-collar workers leave the streets, they are replaced by those with nothing to lose. Developers and bankers are currently playing the most dangerous game of their lives. It's called extend and pretend. The bank sees that the borrower can't pay. But the bank doesn't want to take the building, because then it would have to admit a loss and show everyone that there's a crater-sized hole in its balance sheet. So the bank issues a new loan to pay off the old one, pretending the patient is alive. But dead men don't pay their bills. And this mountain of lies, built on empty floors, is about to collapse under its own weight. We stand on the threshold of an event that will rewrite the map of our cities forever. This isn't a real estate crisis. It's a crisis of a civilization that built itself overly expensive anthills and suddenly realized the ants had scattered. The silence in the corridors grows louder, and soon this roar of emptiness will drown out everything else. Let me paint you a picture of what the perfect trap looks like. Not the kind you fall into out of stupidity, but the kind that mathematics itself forces you into. Imagine you bought a huge mansion. It's worth $10 million, but you only had $1 million of your own. The bank gave you $9 million. In 2019, it seemed like the deal of the century. The interest rate was near zero. Money was free. Tenants lined up to rent a corner of your apartment. You felt like king of the world. You thought it would last forever. But this loan had one small peculiarity. It was short-term. After 5 years, you had to repay the bank the entire $9 million at once. Or And this is the key point, take out a new loan to pay off the old one. And so it's 2024. It's time to pay the bills. You go to the bank for a new loan, and then the trap snaps shut. The banker looks at you not as a partner, but as a dead man. He tells you two things. The first, your building is no longer worth $10 million. The tenants have fled. The office is empty. Today, the best price for your asset is $5 million. Second, the interest rate is no longer 0. It's 5%, 6%, 7%. The cost of servicing the debt has tripled, quadrupled. You stand in front of him and realize you owe the bank $9 million while your assets are worth $5 million. You're bankrupt. You haven't just lost your $1 million investment, you're underwater by $4 million. This is precisely the situation commercial property owners across America are currently facing. These aren't isolated cases. This is a systemic epidemic. In the next 18 months, what financiers dreadfully call the maturity wall is approaching. $1.5 trillion in commercial real estate loans must be repaid or refinanced by the end of 2026. $1.5 trillion. To give you an idea of the scale, it's larger than Spain's entire GDP. It's a mountain of debt that's impossible to repay. And it's impossible to refinance because the deal's math no longer works. At the old rates, the building was profitable. At the new rates, it's losing money every single day. Owning this building is like holding a hot coal. The longer you hold it, the more intense the burn. What do the owners do? The biggest players, like Blackstone or Brookfield, are the sharks of capitalism. They don't expect miracles. They simply throw the keys on the bank's tables and walk away. They record losses and write off billions because they understand that things will only get worse. It's called strategic default. Sounds dry, right? But it's actually capitulation. When the smartest money in the room runs for the exit, knocking each other down, you should stop and think. Now watch your hands. Where does this loss go? If the owner leaves and abandons the building is now the bank's problem. The bank issued a $9 million loan using something now worth $5 million as collateral. The bank instantly has a $4 million hole in its balance sheet. Now multiply that hole by thousands of buildings across the country. We're seeing more than just a real estate crisis. We're seeing the beginning of a banking crisis, compared to which the 2008 crash might seem like a warm-up. Back then, the problem was mortgages on residential buildings, which people were still trying to save. Now, the problem is office buildings, which no one needs. Banks are trying to delay the end. They're using the extend and pretend tactic. They're giving borrowers grace periods, turning a blind eye to covenant violations, and painting pretty figures on their reports, pretending the collateral is still valuable. It's like treating gangrene with a bandage. It works for a day, maybe a week. But underneath the bandage, the tissue continues to rot, and when you take it off, there's nothing left to save. You'll have to amputate the leg. In this case, amputate a huge part of the banking system. You're told the economy is strong. You're shown GDP charts. But what they're not telling you is that beneath the foundation of this economy, a $1.5 trillion clockwork is ticking. The clock is ticking toward midnight. Loans are expiring. And every day, as rates remain high, the noose around the commercial real estate market tightens. There's no good way out here. If the Fed cuts rates to save housing, they'll send inflation through the roof. If they keep rates high, they'll kill the banks. Zugzwang. Any move leads to defeat. And while you're watching this video, somewhere in New York, another developer receives a letter from a bank denying him refinancing. He pours himself a whiskey, looks out the window at his empty skyscraper, and realizes the game is over. Math has won. The only question is who exactly will be caught in the rubble when this wall collapses. And I'll tell you, the rubble won't fall on the developers. It'll fall on you. Do you think an empty skyscraper is the millionaire who owns its problem? You're wrong. An empty skyscraper is a cancer in the heart of your city. And it's already starting to metastasize. Let's descend from the 40th floor to the sidewalk. Look at this street. There used to be life here. At 8 in the morning, the sidewalks were black with the suits of clerks hurrying to work. At 1 in the afternoon, there were lines for sandwiches at the cafes. At 6 in the evening, the bars were packed with people celebrating the closing of deals. There is emptiness here now. The city's ecosystem operated like a single mechanism. The office worker was the fuel that fueled all small businesses. They bought coffee. They took shirts to the dry cleaner. They bought flowers for their wife. They dined at restaurants. One remote employee is a loss of $15,000 to $20,000 a year for a city's local economy. Multiply that by millions of empty desks. What happens when the fuel runs out? The engine stalls. The owner of the coffee shop on the ground floor can't pay the rent. He closes. His employees lose their jobs and stop buying groceries from the convenience store. The store closes. The owner can't pay the mortgage. The cycle continues. But this is only the first circle of hell. The worst begins when the blow reaches the city treasury. Commercial property taxes are the lifeblood of any metropolitan city's budget. In New York, Boston, and Chicago, these taxes account for up to 30% of all city revenue. 30%. This is the money that pays for police and firefighters, garbage collection, and school and road maintenance. When office values fall, the tax base collapses, leaving the city with a billion-dollar budget hole. What does a mayor do when he's broke? He only has two options, and both lead to disaster. Option 1, cut spending, fire the police. Reduce trash collection, close parks, stop repairing the metro. The city is becoming dirty and dangerous. Option 2, raise taxes on those who remain. For you. Raise the housing tax, the sales tax, the parking tax. And this is where the urban doom loop starts. Crime is rising because there are fewer police. Taxes are rising because the budget is empty. Life in the city is becoming both expensive and dangerous. People with money and opportunity are looking at this and saying, enough. They're packing up and leaving. The middle class is leaving. Families are leaving. Taxpayers are leaving. And who remains? Those who cannot leave. And those who prey on those who cannot leave. We've seen this movie before. It was called Detroit. But back then, it was the tragedy of one city losing its industry. Now, it's the scenario for every major business center in America. San Francisco has become a ghost of its former self. Downtown, once the crown jewel of the tech world, now resembles the set of a zombie apocalypse movie. Major retailers are closing their flagship stores and leaving because theft has become the norm and customers are simply not there. These are not temporary difficulties. This is a structural breakdown. Cities were built around the idea that people should go downtown to work. We spent 100 years building this infrastructure. Roads, bridges, tunnels, everything led to the office core. Now we've torn that core out. Vast towers without people are turning into vertical slums. Without proper maintenance, elevators break down, pipes leak, and security systems fail. The buildings are deteriorating at an alarming rate. Sleeping ordinary people think, so what? It doesn't concern me. I live in the suburbs. Naive. When a metropolis's budget collapses, the wave will wash over the suburbs. Regional economies are linked by thousands of invisible threads. If the heart stops, the fingers can't continue to function. They turn blue. We are witnessing the end of an era for great American cities as we knew them. They won't disappear from the map tomorrow, but they will be transformed. They will become poorer, tougher, more dangerous. It will be a slow, painful fading, like the lights in a theater which don't go out all at once, but gradually, lamp by lamp, until the audience is left in complete darkness. And you, sitting in the front row, suddenly realize that the performance is over, and you can't see the exit from the hall. Do you think the worst things are empty streets and rising crime? No. The worst things are happening now in the quiet offices of risk managers, where people in expensive suits stare at screens and realize they are the living dead. The commercial real estate crisis isn't just a brick and mortar problem. It's a detonator that will detonate the U.S. banking system. Think back to 2008. Back then, the villains were home mortgages. Today, the villains are office building loans, but there's one crucial difference. In 2008, debt was spread across Wall Street giants. Today, this toxic bomb lies in the basements of regional banks. Small and mid-sized banks, the ones where you keep your savings and where your local business gets its loans, hold 70% of all commercial real estate loans on their balance sheets. 70%. This isn't risk diversification. It's collective suicide. Think of a bank as a boat. The mortgages are the cargo at the bottom of the boat. As long as the sea is calm, all is well. But now there's a storm and the cargo has turned to lead, dragging the boat down. When a developer throws down the keys and defaults, the bank receives an empty building instead of cash, worth half the loan it issued. The bank is obligated to write off this loss, but it doesn't have enough capital to cover this loss. What happens next? Bankruptcy. We saw a preview of this film in the spring of 2023. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, First Republic. They collapsed in a matter of days. The authorities poured money on the fire, claiming that the system is stable. It was a lie. They didn't put out the fire, they just covered it with a blanket. And under the blanket, the fire burned even more fiercely. The $1.5 trillion debt wall is a tsunami already visible on the horizon. A skyscraper-high wave is heading toward the shore, while people on the beach continue to build sandcastles, believing the Federal Reserve's claims of a soft landing. There won't be a soft landing. We'll hit the ground at 300 kilometers per hour. Wall Street knows this. The big predators have already shed their dead weight. They're selling assets, hedging risks, and cashing in. They're getting ready to buy up the wreckage for pennies on the dollar. And who will be left with the losses? You. Depositors, taxpayers, pensioners. Because when regional banks start failing by the dozens a week, the deposit insurance fund simply won't have enough money to cover them all. The printing press will be turned on full blast. And those dollars you might have saved from the bank will go up in flames of inflation. We stand on the threshold of the greatest transfer of property in history. Assets built by the labor of generations will pass from failed banks and foundations into the hands of those with access to the printing press. The era of skyscrapers as temples of success is over. They are now mausoleums of capital. Look at your city. Look at your bank. Look at your money. Do you still believe that this time it will be different? Mathematics doesn't believe in hope. Mathematics doesn't believe in politicians' promises. Mathematics sees only one thing. The equation doesn't converge, and it will be solved by force. The clock struck midnight. The carriage turned into a pumpkin. And you're still waiting for the ball. Run while the doors are still open.